You're standing on that lot right now, keys in your hand, that big truck gleaming under the lights, the salesman smiling, and you're about to sign. Stop. Some of these trucks will drain your bank account before you hit 100,000 miles. I've watched it happen. I've had grown men stand in my shop staring at a $4,000 estimate, asking me how a truck this expensive could break this bad. I've turned wrenches for over 30 years. I've seen the same badges limp into my bay again and again. And I'm going to tell you which ones. Stick with me to the end, because there's one engine code buried in a service bulletin most buyers never hear about. And there's one truck almost nobody talks about that quietly outlasts everything on this list. This matters whether you're buying new, buying used, or you're already parked in one right now. Let me start with the one that broke my heart the most. Back around 2004, a fella named Dale rolled into my shop with a Ford Superduty. Beautiful truck, the 6.0-liter Power-Stroke diesel, under the hood. He'd bought it to pull his camper. 6 months later, it was in my bay with white smoke pouring out the tailpipe. Blown head gaskets. Now here's what nobody told Dale. That 6.0 Power-Stroke, built from 2003 through 2007, has a design flaw baked right into it. The head bolts, there's only 10 of them per head, and they stretch under pressure. When they stretch, the heads lift. Combustion gases push into the cooling system. And the whole thing cooks itself from the inside out. You know what it costs to fix that right? To pull the cab off, machine the heads, install stronger studs? Between $4,000 and $8,000. I've written that estimate more times than I can count. And the EGR cooler on that engine, it clogs and cracks and dumps coolant. Another problem, another $800 to $1,500 every time. The worst part? Buyers loved these trucks because they were fast and strong. The dealership sold them as workhorses. Nobody mentioned that the workhorse would need open-heart surgery. So here's my rule. If you're looking at a used Super Duty from those years and it's got the 6.0, you walk unless it's already been what we call bulletproofed, meaning somebody spent thousands installing head studs and a better oil cooler and deleting the weak parts. If it hasn't been done, that truck is a grenade with the pin half out. But that diesel wasn't the only Ford I learned to fear, because the gas engine sitting in millions of half-ton trucks had a trick of its own, and this one, it bites you in a way you'll never see coming. Let me tell you about the 3-valve, 5.4-liter Triton V8. Ford put this in the F-150 from about 2004 through 2010. Millions of them. And two things about this engine made mechanics rich and owners miserable. First, the spark plugs. On this engine, the plugs are a two-piece design, and they seize into the aluminum cylinder head. When you go to change them, and every engine needs plugs eventually, they snap off. Half the plug stays buried in the head. I've spent 2-3 hours per plug, sometimes, extracting the broken piece with special tools, praying I don't drop debris into the cylinder. A simple plug job that should cost you a couple $100 turns into a $900 to $1,600 nightmare. Second, and this is the killer, the cam phasers. This engine uses variable timing parts driven by oil pressure. When they wear, and they wear early if you skip an oil change, you get a loud, rattling knock on cold startup that sounds like the engine is throwing rocks around inside. Fixing it means phasers, timing chains, guides, the works. $2,000 to $3,500. I had a school teacher bring me one of these. She kept hearing the rattle. 3 different quick lube places told her it was normal. It wasn't. By the time she got to me, the timing had jumped, and she needed the whole front of the engine rebuilt. She cried in my waiting room. That's the part the marketing never shows you. So if you're shopping a used F-150 from that decade, start it cold, ice cold, first thing in the morning. If you hear a rattle for more than a second or two on startup, that's the phasers talking. Walk away, or use it to knock thousands off the price and fix it right. Now, you might be thinking the other brands were smarter, that the bow tie boys over at Chevy and GMC learned from all this. Therefore, let me show you what they were doing at the very same time, because it might be the most expensive design decision in modern truck history. Here's a truck everybody trusts. The Chevy Silverado, the GMC Sierra, the 5.3-liter V8. Solid engine on paper, and for years a solid engine in real life. Then somebody in an office decided to save fuel with something called active fuel management. sometimes badged as dynamic fuel management on the newer ones. The idea sounds clever. Shut off half the cylinders when you're cruising, run on 4, save a little gas. Here's what actually happens in my bay. The system uses special collapsing lifters to deactivate those cylinders. Those lifters fail. When one collapses and jams, it can wipe out the camshaft lobe it rides on. Now you've got metal shavings in your oil and a truck that runs rough, ticks loud, and throws a check engine light. On the trucks from roughly 2014 up through recent years, this has been a plague. I've replaced lifters and cams on these with under 100,000 miles on the clock. The bill? A lifter and camshaft job on one of these runs, $3,000 to $4,500 once you count all the labor pulling the intake and heads apart. Because you might be asking, how did all these trucks with all these known problems keep getting sold year after year to good people who worked hard for the money? Here's the truth, and it's going to make you angry. The people who designed these systems knew. The cylinder deactivation, the 2-piece spark plugs, the 10-head bolt diesel, the coolerless transmission. These weren't accidents. They were decisions. Somebody in a boardroom looked at a spreadsheet and chose to save $15 per truck on a part, knowing full well it would fail after the warranty ran out. After the warranty. That timing is not a coincidence. That's the game. Build it to survive just past the bumper-to-bumper coverage so the failure lands squarely in your lap and not on their balance sheet. The fuel-saving gadget that sells the truck on the lot becomes the $4,000 repair in your driveway 3 years later. And the dealership that sold it to you, they make more money fixing it than they made selling it. Your breakdown is their service department's best month. I got burned by this myself, years ago, before I knew better. Bought a truck for the badge and the shine, ignored the little rattle, and paid for it with a rebuild I couldn't afford at the time. That memory is exactly why I stand here and tell you the truth. The marketing budget is designed to hide. Nobody warned me, so I'm warning you. Here's where I need to hand you the same thing I hand every buyer who's smart enough to check before they sign. Picture yourself back on that lot next month, keys in hand, that engine idling, and this time you actually know what the rattle means and which badge to walk away from. That's the whole point of the book I put together, the complete lemon-proof bundle. It's the full, permanent version of everything I'm telling you here. Inside Buy Right, you get the engines and transmissions to avoid laid out by model year and family, plus brand rankings built on repair records and not ad budgets, and the truck buyer's checklist with 6 simple go or no-go criteria. Deep Reliability walks you through reading the same complaint data and service bulletins a safety engineer reads, so you can spot a systemic failure like these lifters long before the salesman ever mentions it. And the Lemon Files gives you the frame and rust audit built for trucks that ran in the Salt Belt, plus a full history decoding chapter. Here's a check you can run tonight, free, from your own kitchen table. Take any truck you're thinking about, go to the government complaint database, and search the model and year the way I show you. If the same failure shows up hundreds of times, that's a pattern, not bad luck, and you just saved yourself a $4,000 estimate. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And here's the honest reason to grab it before your next purchase, not after. The moment you sign, the design flaw becomes your problem and your balance sheet, so the checklist only helps you while you can still walk away. Stick with me, because in a minute I'm going to show you exactly why the people who designed these trucks knew about every one of these flaws, and it's going to make you angry. And there's a second sickness on these same engines: oil consumption. The AFM system on certain years, especially the older 2010 through 2013 5.3, burns oil through the rings and the deactivation system. Owners come in swearing they never see a leak on the driveway, but they're a quart low every 1,000 miles. Run it low without knowing, and you cook the whole engine. Here's the insider truth nobody at the counter tells you. There are little devices, disablers, that stop the cylinder deactivation from ever engaging. A lot of us in the trade install them on our own personal trucks. That tells you everything. When the mechanics who know how the sausage is made are disabling the fancy fuel-saving feature on their own vehicles, you should ask why the salesman bragged about it. So if you're buying one of these, ask straight up whether the lifters have ever failed and been replaced. Check the oil level and smell it for that burnt metallic tang, and know that the fuel it saves you will never, ever add up to a $4,500 engine teardown. But at least those were big American V8s doing familiar things. Because the next truck I want to warn you about tried to play in the big leagues, and the transmission it hid inside is the reason I tell people to be careful with one particular full-size that looks like a bargain. Let me talk about the Nissan Titan, and more specifically, some of the Nissan and Infiniti vehicles sharing parts around it, but the truck story here is the transmission and the reputation. The first-generation Titan, from about 2004 through 2015, had a real problem with its rear axle and its brakes wearing strangely fast, and the early ones had a reputation for eating through brake rotors and having rear differential issues. But the bigger trap I want you to understand is broader than one truck. It's what happens when a company puts a weak automatic transmission behind a strong engine to save money. I've seen it across several brands. A transmission that runs too hot, has no dedicated cooler, and starts slipping and shuddering around 100,000 miles. When one of those lets go, you're looking at $3,500 to $5,000 for a rebuild or a replacement unit. On a truck that's only worth $8,000 or $9,000 used, that repair totals the vehicle. It's not worth fixing. And that's the cruelest math in my business, when the repair costs more than the truck is worth, and a family loses their only vehicle over it. Here's the takeaway that applies to any truck you look at. Get down and find the transmission. Ask if it has an auxiliary cooler. Pull the dipstick if it has one and look at the fluid. Pink or red and clean is good. Brown and it smells burnt, that's a transmission screaming for help. Dark burnt fluid is the single cheapest warning sign of the single most expensive repair, and almost nobody checks it before they buy. Now, here's where I need to talk to you directly, because I know some of you watching are getting a sick feeling in your stomach. You already own one of these trucks. You're sitting there doing the math on payments you've still got left. This next part is for you, so listen close. You are not helpless, and it is not too late. There are things you can do this weekend, in your own driveway, with no shop and almost no money, that can catch these failures early or slow them down for years. First thing, check your oil the right way, and check it often. I mean every other fill-up. On these engines that burn oil quietly, the 5.3 GM, the 5.4 Ford, running just a quarter too low, is what turns a healthy engine into a scrapyard boat anchor. Pull the dipstick, wipe it, dip it again, and if you're low, top it off with the exact oil weight printed on your cap. This 1-2-minute habit has saved more engines than any part I've ever installed. Second, change your oil more often than the manual says. The manual might tell you 7,500 or even 10,000 miles. On the cam phaser Fords and the AFM Chevys, that oil is what keeps the whole system alive. Do it every 4,000 to 5,000 miles with the correct full synthetic. Dirty, worn-out oil is the #1 killer of those cam phasers and lifters. Clean oil is the cheapest insurance you will ever buy, cheaper than a single restaurant dinner, and it buys you years. Third, listen to your truck cold. Every morning, that first startup before you touch the gas, just listen for 2 seconds. A rattle, a knock, a heavy tick that fades after a moment. That sound is your early warning system. If you catch a phaser or a lifter starting to go and you get ahead of it, you might fix it for a fraction of what a full failure costs. Ignore it. Drive it another 6 months and you'll be paying for the engine. Fourth, and this one's free, if you've got a diesel or a truck with a transmission cooler, look under it for leaks and keep the radiator and cooler fins clean of bugs and mud. Overheating is what kills these units. A garden hose in 10 minutes can drop your operating temperature and add years of life. Write these down. Do them this weekend. You already own the truck, so your job now is to make it live as long as humanly possible, and these 4 things genuinely do that. I've seen trucks with 250,000 miles on them because the owner did exactly this, sitting right next to trucks that died at 90,000 because the owner trusted the maintenance light. Now, that brings me to something that's been building this whole time. But knowing the trap is only half the battle. Because the real question, the one you clicked on this video to answer, is simple. If all these trucks are landmines, what should you actually buy? What quietly runs forever while everybody else is broke down on the shoulder? Let me give you a few more traps first, quick and sharp, because you need to recognize the whole minefield. The Ram 1500 EcoDiesel, the 3-liter turbo diesel from around 2014 through 2019. People fell in love with the fuel economy. Then the EGR coolers started cracking, the oil coolers failed, and worst of all, some of these had lifter and valve train problems that could put you into a whole engine replacement. I've seen EcoDiesel engine jobs quoted north of $10,000. $10,000 on a half-ton pickup. The fuel savings never in a million years cover that. Then there's the newer Ford F-150 with the 10-speed automatic transmission, the one developed to chase better fuel numbers. When they work, they're fine. When they don't, owners report harsh shifting, clunking, and shuddering, and I've had them in my bay for valve body and internal repairs that run well over $2,000, sometimes far more, on a truck barely out of its early years. The complaint databases are stacked with these. That tells me it's not one bad unit, it's a pattern. And I'll say this about a lot of the fancy turbocharged small engines they're stuffing into big trucks now. The little twin-turbo V6 making big V8 power sounds great in the commercial. But turbos are heat, and heat is wear, and when a turbo lets go or the carbon builds up on the valves of a direct-injected engine, you're back in my bay, writing another big check. More power, more parts, more things to fail. Simplicity lasts. Complexity breaks. So here's the pattern under all of it. The trucks that die young are the ones that chased a number on a sticker, a fuel economy figure, a horsepower brag, at the cost of the parts that actually have to last. Every single trap on this list traces back to somebody trading your long-term reliability for a short-term selling point. Therefore, the real answer, is the truck built by people who refuse to make that trade. And this is the part I promised you at the very beginning. This is the one almost nobody talks about. Here's what I found, and where I found it. There's a long-running dependability study, the kind that tracks how many problems vehicles have as they age, put out every year by the folks who survey hundreds of thousands of real owners. And year after year, buried in that data, past all the flashy new models, is a truck that keeps posting numbers the others can only dream about. The Toyota Tundra with the old 5.7-liter V8, the 3URFE engine, built from about 2007 through 2021. Now hear me out, because this is the opposite of everything I just warned you about. That engine has no cylinder deactivation gimmick, no tiny turbos straining to make big power, no two-piece spark plugs designed to snap. It's a naturally aspirated V8 that Toyota deliberately built simple, strong, and boring. And boring in my world is the most beautiful word there is. I've had these Tundras in my shop with 250,000, 300,000 miles, and the owner came in for nothing more than brakes and a water pump. I've seen them cross into 400,000 miles still running the original engine and transmission. There are documented, verified examples out there, one famous Tundra that a company put over 900,000 miles on and tore down the engine to find it barely worn. Toyota was so confident they took that engine back and put it on display. Here's the buried part the market never priced in correctly. Because these trucks aren't flashy, and because that 5.7 isn't the best on fuel, a lot of buyers overlooked them for years. Which means, if you find a well-kept one used, you're getting the single most reliable full-size truck powertrain of its generation, and you're often getting it for less hassle than the trucks that break. The dependability data backed it up the whole time. The honest survey preserved the truth while the marketing for every other truck buried it. The catch, and I'll be straight with you because that's the deal between us, is that everybody in the know has caught on now, so these Tundras hold their value like gold. You'll pay for one, but you're paying for a truck that will still be running when the others are long dead in a scrapyard. That's not an expense. That's the cheapest cost per mile you can buy. And if a 5.7 Tundra is out of reach, the same philosophy points you to the older, simpler engines in general. A Toyota with the smaller V8 or the proven V6. An older Chevy 5.3 from before they leaned so hard on the deactivation system, well maintained. A Superduty diesel from the years after they fixed the headbolt disaster. The rule is always the same. Simple lasts, boring lasts. The truck that doesn't try to impress you on the lot is the one that's still starting every morning 10 years from now. Check the oil. Smell the transmission fluid. Listen to it cold. Walk away from the gimmick engines. And when in doubt, buy the boring one that the surveys, not the salesman, have been quietly praising for 15 years. Let me tell you what this really comes down to. After 30 years of writing estimates I hated handing to good people. You almost signed for a truck that would have owned you instead of the other way around. You almost spent your Saturdays under a tow truck's hook and your paychecks on somebody else's design mistake. And now you won't. Now you know which rattle means run, which fluid means walk, and which boring old V8 means peace of mind. You're the kind of driver who wasn't going to get sold a lemon and smile about it. You wanted the truth. The kind of brother-in-law who happens to fix cars would give you over the fence, and now you've got it. You already know what to do next time you're standing on that lot with the keys in your hand. So do me one favor. Tell me down in the comments, which one hit closest to home? Are you driving one of those 5.4 Fords with the spark plug curse, or an AFM Chevy that's been sipping oil behind your back, or did you already make the jump to a Tundra that just won't quit? Tell me the truck, tell me the mileage, and tell me where in the country you're watching from. I read these, and I answer. And if you refuse to be the next person standing in a shop staring at a $4,000 estimate, come stand with the rest of us who decided not to get burned. Subscribe and ride along, because keeping your truck alive is a lot easier when somebody's warning you before you buy, not after. Grab the maintenance habits we talked about and actually use them, because the cheapest repair is always the one you prevented. Next time, I'm pulling the curtain back on the used SUVs that look like steals on the lot but hide a transmission that self-destructs right around 90,000 miles. And there's one popular model on that list that half of you are probably driving right now. You won't want to miss which one. Until then, check your oil, trust the boring one, and don't let anybody sell you a payment dressed up as a truck. Now, this video gave you the overview, but I couldn't fit it all here. Inside the Garage Bench Club, I pick up right where we stopped with the full breakdown. And you can ask me your own question. A real person, me, answers you myself. You're not doing this alone. Folks like you are already in there. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen. And if it's not for you, cancel anytime. Now that you know which trucks to steer clear of, let me show you something better. There are a handful of dirt sheet pickups nobody talks about that'll outlast every new truck out there. That one's starting right here.